servant of God, intercessor for deliverance and healing, reveals how to pray and fast to receive an answer from God. The room was dim, the air thick with anticipation. As the clock struck midnight, a servant of God knelt in the quiet darkness, his heart racing with an urgent calling. His spirit wrestled with the silence, the heavy weight of what was to come. He knew the time had arrived. Time to pray, to fast, to seek the answer that had eluded him for years. But something was different this time. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine, and he felt it, the presence of something darker, something unknown, lurking just beyond the veil of the visible world. He closed his eyes, praying harder now, trying to reach the divine. Yet, the deeper he prayed, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Was it a test, or was it something more sinister? His mind raced, but amidst the chaos, a whisper broke through the silence. The power to heal and to deliver lies within you, but first you must pay the price. As he fasted, as he prayed, his body grew weak, yet his spirit grew stronger. Each passing hour felt like an eternity. The enemy was closing in, testing him, pulling him into the darkness. His body ached as if it were being torn apart. The fast was more intense than he had ever imagined, his hunger gnawing at him, his throat parched. But it wasn't the physical hunger that gnawed at his soul. It was the feeling of a presence in the room with him, an overwhelming sense of being watched. He dared not open his eyes, for fear of seeing what he could not explain. His breath quickened. Was it the enemy trying to break his resolve, or was this part of the divine trial? As the hours wore on, he began to hear faint whispers, like the rustling of leaves in a windless room. At first, he dismissed it as a figment of his imagination, a trick of the mind under strain. But then it grew louder, closer, until it felt as though someone or something was standing right next to him. The shadow in the corner of the room seemed to stretch and twist, its form dark and formless, its presence suffocating. The servant clenched his fists, muttering under his breath, "I am not afraid. I will not falter." Suddenly the air shifted. The coldness grew unbearable, and a dark mist began to creep along the edges of the room. His heart raced and his hands shook as he opened his eyes, unable to resist the pull of the darkness. He saw them, eyes, glowing like fiery embers, staring at him from within the mist. He felt their gaze pierce through him, as though they could see his deepest fears, his greatest doubts. The servant's pulse quickened, but he refused to look away. "I will fast. I will pray. I will not be moved," he whispered to himself. The whisper returned, a voice now clearer, more distinct. "You wish for deliverance and healing. You wish for answers from God, but you do not understand the cost." His heart skipped a beat. What did the voice mean? What price would he have to pay to receive what he had been desperately seeking? He felt a tremor in his soul, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. It was as though the very air around him was closing in, suffocating him, but he refused to stop. He knew that God had called him to this place for a reason. For hours there was nothing but silence, the oppressive darkness, the shadows. Everything had stopped. The servant remained on his knees, his body trembling, but his spirit more determined than ever. He knew this was the calm before the storm. And then it came. The voice again, this time more powerful, more commanding. "The time has come. Your prayers have reached the heavens. But now you must prepare. Your deliverance will come, but you must first face what lies ahead." Suddenly, he was no longer in the room. The walls around him vanished, and he was standing in a vast, desolate landscape, an endless battlefield. The ground was cracked and barren, and the sky above him churned with dark clouds. He could hear the sounds of battle in the distance, the clash of swords, the cries of pain, the roars of something monstrous. This was no ordinary place. This was a spiritual battlefield, a realm where only the strongest souls could survive. Out of the darkness, something stirred. A massive, shadowy figure emerged from the depths of the ground, its eyes glowing with malice. It was monstrous, with claws that scraped the earth, its body twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. The servant's heart raced and he instinctively stepped back. But the voice in his head spoke once more. "Face your fears. Only then will you be free." The beast slowly approached him, its massive form blocking the light. As it neared, it spoke, its voice low and guttural. "You seek power, servant of God. You seek deliverance. But I can give you more. I can grant you all the power you desire. No more fasting, no more prayer. Just a single word, and it's yours." The temptation was overwhelming. His hands clenched, and for a brief moment he wondered, would it be so wrong to accept the power offered? But then the voice of God thundered in his mind. "No, my servant. Resist. I am your only source of strength." As the beast drew closer, the servant felt his resolve waver. His body was weak, his mind exhausted. The darkness whispered promises of comfort, of an end to his suffering. He could have it all. He could stop the fast, the pain, the trials. All he had to do was surrender. But deep within, he knew that this was not the way. He had to stand firm, to trust in God. With every ounce of strength, he shouted, "Get behind me, Satan!" Suddenly, a blinding light pierced through the darkness, and the beast shrieked in agony, retreating it into the shadows. The servant fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He was exhausted, his body trembling, but the light filled him with peace. He had passed the test. The darkness was gone, and in its place, he felt the presence of God. His prayers had been answered. He had fought the battle and won. In that moment, he understood. The answer had always been within him. The fast, the prayer. They were not just about enduring physical pain, but about transforming his spirit, about strengthening his connection to the divine. The price he had paid was not just for healing and deliverance, but for a deeper understanding of God's will. The servant slowly rose to his feet, his strength renewed. His vision was clearer now, his faith stronger. He realized that the deliverance he had sought was not simply a momentary relief. It was a transformation, a refining of his soul. He had learned that the true power to heal, to deliver, had always been within him, waiting to be unlocked through faith and surrender. As the dawn broke, the room around him began to change. The oppressive darkness that had once filled the space now gave way to a soft, warm light. The servant stood tall, his heart calm, knowing that he had received the answer from God. His journey was far from over, but he now carried with him the strength and understanding needed to face whatever lay ahead. He had learned the true meaning of prayer and fasting, not as a means to force God's hand, but as a way to align himself with divine purpose. His body, though weak, was now a vessel of power, for he had learned that, through surrender, healing and deliverance could be found. And as he stood there, he whispered softly, "I am ready for whatever comes next. I trust in God's timing, His will, and His strength, and I will continue to pray, to fast, and to seek, for I know that with God, all things are possible." The servant walked away from that room, no longer the man who had entered hours before. He was now something more, an intercessor, a servant of God who had experienced the deep transformative power of prayer and fasting, and with that, he knew he was prepared to face whatever battles lay ahead. with God by his side. As the sun rose on the horizon, the soft light that filtered into the room seemed almost supernatural, as if the very sky had opened a portal to the truth. The servant, now renewed, felt the weight of the experience deep in his soul, but something still unsettled him. What was this feeling of incompleteness that lingered, as though there was more, something deeper, waiting to be revealed? He turned, looking at the door that had closed behind him, as if the room he had been in for so long had become a point of transition, a threshold. Every step he took felt like a journey into the unknown, a step toward what lay beyond the veil of this world. The weight of his purpose was heavy, but it was no longer one of fear or doubt. It was the weight of divine responsibility, a calling that could not be ignored. The fast had brought him closer to God, but it also revealed a truth that was more frightening than anything he had faced. He was not the only one who sought deliverance. A sudden shiver ran down his spine as a dark thought crept into his mind. There were forces in the world, both seen and unseen, that opposed the divine purpose, and they would stop at nothing to prevent the fulfillment of God's will. He could feel it now, the subtle shift in the air around him. He wasn't alone in this battle. There was something, someone, watching, waiting, as if testing his resolve once more. His breath quickened, and he found himself instinctively gripping his hands tighter, clenching his fists in preparation. "Am I truly ready?" he whispered to himself. The question echoed in the silence, and he realized there was no turning back now. The journey had only just begun. His prayer and fasting had opened doors he couldn't yet understand. And with each step forward, he could feel the tension building. A deep, almost imperceptible rumble seemed to vibrate the floor beneath his feet. His mind raced with images of the shadowy figures he had seen earlier, the eyes that burned into his very soul. But this time, there was no mistaking the danger that was approaching. The enemy had taken notice of him, and the battle for his spirit was far from over. The air grew colder once again, and the whispers began. Low, distorted voices, curling around his thoughts like tendrils of darkness. They promised him power, safety, and freedom from the struggles he had endured. "You need not suffer," the voices cooed. "Just yield. Just surrender." But he shook his head. The power they offered was not the power he sought. His eyes burned with determination, his soul unwilling to be swayed. "I am not yours to control," he declared, his voice stronger than he felt. "I serve only God." In that moment the dark voices faltered, as though they had not expected such resistance. The mist that had begun to surround him seemed to recede, and for a moment the room was eerily silent. He stood tall, grounded by faith, yet aware that the battle was not won. There would be more trials, more tests, and then the voice of God broke through the stillness, a gentle yet commanding whisper in his ear. "Fear not, my child, for I am with you. You are not alone in this fight." With those words, a warmth spread through his chest, filling him with peace and strength. He had been tested, but he had emerged victorious, and yet a new revelation dawned upon him. The power to deliver and heal was not just about his strength or his faith alone. It was about the relationship he cultivated with the divine, the surrender of his own will to God's purpose. The journey of prayer and fasting was a vessel, a conduit for divine power that flowed through him when he yielded to God's will. His mind was clear now, and the whispers were gone. The enemy had been repelled for the moment, but he knew this was only one battle in a much larger war. A war not only for his soul, but for the souls of others who were lost in the shadows of this world. As he took another step toward the door, a new sense of urgency filled his heart. He had been called for a purpose, far greater than himself, and the world around him was waiting for the answer. God's answer! As the servant stepped through the door, the light grew blinding, enveloping him entirely. For a brief moment it felt as though time itself had frozen. His pulse was the only sound in the stillness. Then, in a flash, everything went dark. He was no longer standing in the room. The world around him had shifted. And now he stood on the edge of a vast abyss, staring into an endless expanse of swirling shadows. The ground beneath him trembled, as if something far beneath the surface was awakening. Something ancient, something malevolent. A voice, low and ominous, echoed from the depths of the abyss. You have chosen the path of light. But remember, every choice has its price. The war is far from over, and soon you will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine. The servant's heart raced. His hand instinctively reached for the sacred symbols around his neck, symbols that had guided him through the darkest moments of his life. And yet, he could feel a new weight pressing down on him, as if the very atmosphere was charged with impending doom. The whispers returned, now louder, more urgent. You cannot hide forever. Darkness will find you. It will tear you apart if you do not surrender. But this time the servant was not afraid. He stood firm, unwavering, as the shadows raged around him. I am not afraid of the darkness. I am a servant of the Most High. His power flows through me. The ground beneath him cracked open, and the shadows lunged, reaching for him with tendrils of black smoke. But before they could touch him, the servant raised his hands to the sky, his voice booming. In the name of God, I command you to leave. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in anger as they were driven back by the force of his prayer. The servant's heart pounded in his chest, but his spirit soared. The battle was not over, but he had won this round. And he knew, deep down in the very marrow of his bones, that the power to heal, to deliver, to overcome, had always been within him. He just had to believe. As the shadows began to fade, the light from above grew even brighter, and a voice echoed through the vastness. You have chosen the path of the righteous, but your trials are far from complete. Prepare, for the world you know will soon shift in ways you cannot yet comprehend. The servant took a deep breath, his resolve stronger than ever. He knew now that the journey was just beginning. The world was on the edge of a great awakening, and he was the one chosen to guide them through the darkness. The screen flickered, the air crackling with energy. The servant stood tall, unbroken, as the whispers faded into nothingness. He turned towards the light, ready for whatever came next, his heart aflame with a newfound purpose. And just as the screen was about to fade to black, a final message appeared. What happens next? You won't believe it. Stay tuned.